Welcome to the WebWell Podcast, brought to you by Cascade Web Development. I'm one of your hosts, Simon, along with Ben, and we can't wait to dive into all things internet, tech, web development, and web design. We'll also be discussing how we balance work and life and exploring the fascinating world of internet innovation. So whether you're a tech enthusiast or just looking for some entertainment, join us on this exciting journey as we explore the ever-changing landscape of the web. Thanks for tuning in, and let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to WebWell Podcast, episode number 13. I'm super excited to be joined, as always, with Ben, and our guest today is Colby Schlicker. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on the show with you guys.
Yeah.
Right on. Thanks, Colby.
No, I'm excited for today's topic. I'll spill it a little early, and then we'll do some intros, but again, playfully, as we were talking offline, 99 Reasons off of Jay-Z's song. So 99 Reasons for a Redesign, but a new marketing director ain't one. So that's today's topic. But first, let's start off with some intros. Ben, what's going on? Introduce us to Colby, and we'll go from there.
Sounds excellent. Yeah, Colby and I have been friends and working together in a variety of different capacities for, it feels like well over a decade, and just love our the origin story of our friendship. It's another one of those reminders that the women in our lives are usually responsible for so much of our success. So, Colby, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to find yourself in this industry.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you and my wife worked together at one point in time, and I was looking for a new gig, and she introduced me to you, and you introduced me to Lewis and Clark Bank, and that's where my marketing career took off in 2008. And my first day on the job was a website meeting at Cascade Web Development back in the day. So, yeah, I've been in marketing since 2008. I was at Lewis and Clark Bank, which was a startup bank and still one of the youngest banks on the West Coast, as far as I know, from back then, and was there for almost 7.5 years. Eventually moved in with my agency of record at the time, Watson Creative, and was there for about 5 years and was, director of growth there. Also ran strategy, sold a lot of websites and brand work during that time. And then during the pandemic, left and started my own consulting business, which I've been doing since, with a quick stop at Migration Brewing, which is an excellent business here in Portland, where I was the marketing director there. So I'm honored that you guys have invited me on the show, where we can talk a lot about the biz and stuff that we've been in together. And I'm sure we've seen a lot of things, a lot of projects and experiences that are similar.
Yeah, excellent. So tell us, what are you up to now these days now, Colby?
Yeah, I'm currently running my own consultancy firm. Just me, fancy way of saying just me, but I've got a number of clients here in Portland, and I'm trying to, I think the fancy model name right now is a fractional CMO or fractional marketing director type role, and I've got a couple clients here in town where I'm spending time with them each week, sometimes helping them out with strategy, sometimes helping them out with production. And in this point in time, in this environment, it's just really trying to get scrappy and get my hands dirty and try to build something. We'll see where it takes me. But right now, I'm just really enjoying being hands-on with a few clients. Yeah. I find that very rewarding. And, in the sort of remote world right now, it works with my family. But I am itching to kind of get a little more in-person work with folks. So I'm kind of looking forward for the world coming back and me spending a little more time face-to-face with people too. So we're trying to navigate all that, trying to build up the business a bit, but, a wide range of things, wide range of projects, some of it digital and some of it just, high level advice. And I really enjoy that work too.
Well, I bet your clients really appreciate it too. Like you said, with this environment, the ability to pull in that kind of generalist expertise and then have you source the work that maybe is not within your initial sphere of expertise and really help them move some initiatives forward while managing their costs. So it sounds like a pretty good place to be operating from.
Yeah. And I kind of reminiscing a bit back to 2008 when I first got in at the bank as their marketing director, and thinking about where websites have gone in that time, and just kind of where digital marketing and the digital space has gone in that time. It's just been I mean, I feel like we've seen everything in a little bit, seen it together in a sense during that time, everything from like, websites that can move to the size of the screen in which they're on to Facebook and social media coming on and display advertising. And I think really one of the big trends during that time, which I hope we can talk about today too, is just the level of storytelling and purpose-driven marketing that has really penetrated the priority of dollar spend in a lot of ways too, more than it ever has. And so it's been fun to just kind of preparing for the show today, thinking about all the things that have happened since 2008 in that digital space. It's like, it's really hard. You've been in sort of that specialized spot. I've kind of been generalized and feel like I've got a flavor of everything. But it's hard to just kind of nail down one specific thing in my mind. So, I do like to provide some general advice for my clients, and then I can bring in experts like you guys to come help get certain things over the finish line, or, do a much better job at something I can't do.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. No, it's exciting. Well, great.
Yeah.
Well, Simon, maybe I'll hand it back to you and we can dive into today's topic.
Yeah, I wanted to reflect real quick on a couple of things he was talking about. Talking about from 2008, the changes in marketing, both needs, industries, all that. Like, as you were talking there, Colby, I pictured this like build it and they will come marketing strategy. Isn't the case. I don't think. It may have been back when print was like, let's just put out a beautiful big print ad and we'll get what we want out of that. Where now, like you're saying, you have to be so much more strategic, and very deliberate with messaging, with branding, with that message to spear your little sliver, if you will, of audience. Where back in the day, and again, I wasn't an advertiser back in the day, but when I was going to school, like you're talking about some of those changes, when I was going to school, we talked about print ads, right? Like I was designing print layouts, and I say that jokingly. I love layout and I love print, but like, it's not what it is now. Like, it's changed drastically. So yeah, that's a cool, at least great perspective, seeing from 2008 as a round number to now, just how it's like moved through time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And as you were talking about that, Colby, it got me thinking, like the profession as a practice, right? Because we're trying a lot of stuff on and we think things are going to work. And so that in my mind, it's like, well, what we learned real quick there is metrics. How can we measure effectiveness? Because we can't guarantee results. But boy, you want to find that right cocktail of efforts that will, drive the user to hopefully convert and do what we hope they'll do and find love and connection with the effort. So, that there's a whole bunch of folks that are in the world of metrics and measuring results, because we're kind of practicing and trying things on and, dialing certain things up that appear to be working and other things down that aren't. So it's a pretty fun process.
Yeah, I would, if you don't mind me continuing on this a bit, like, as
Colby,
I've sat on,
continue.
from the agency world, we say, okay, so as we sit on the client, as we say, client side, like, so much of it, you need to find your ROI and you need to kind of fight for budget and you need to do that. And then on the other side of the coin, when you're an agency and, you're trying to educate and you're trying to kind of bring people into this knowledge that you have. And then both parties, whether you're a marketing director or an agency, you've got to just kind of really work your ass off to get those key stakeholders who are cutting the checks to believe in that. And then, in an ever-changing world of digital, it's going to change so fast. It's going to change so quickly. And so to try to make those folks happy and to show the success of your work is an ongoing challenge all the time.
Yeah.
And you just got to keep plugging. And, I've been lucky in a lot of ways to, in my career, work for folks that understand that.
Courage,
they
right?
Understand, they have courage to market, they have courage to invest in brand. They have courage to invest in their digital strategy. And I've seen when people don't, and that's tough, so. sorry about that tangent, but that was just like, it's been a roller coaster, man. This marketing world has been a roller coaster. But it's great.
Well, I think that segues well enough into this topic of 99 reasons for redesign. And again, if your listeners are keying in on this part, redesign, we're typically talking about a website, but we could say a redesign of brand, a redesign of messaging, all of that being the same. We'll say we're talking more specifically website, but 99 reasons for a redesign, but a new marketing director ain't one. And why, Colby, I think you're perfect for this is because you're the marketing director. You're that guy. But you're also not that guy. It's us kind of coming to you and saying we've seen a certain trend, and I'll better explain it in a second, but we've seen a certain trend where turnover is causing a new marketing director come in and they're thinking, and I'll say it, a certain demographic, age possibly being that demographic, are coming in thinking, I need to make a name for myself. How do I do that? And then use this to springboard my career to the next position, maybe, or new fancier job, or that one job that they have cereal in the kitchen, all day long, and I can go snack or whatever, like there's that. And then you, Colby, are kind of in this position too, where you're like, okay, you're coming in. How can I make an impact? But I think what's unique about you and what I've known of you in the short time that we've chatted is that it's not the name for yourself. You're actually needing to make the name for the client. And I think that's the key differentiator between a new marketing director, someone that's coming in to springboard to the next job, and then someone like you that comes in like, I'm really holistically looking at this client and their needs and saying, is the redesign the best choice or not? Is it a facelift? So let's start with defining it. What does this mean? So if you're, again, marketing director coming in, maybe you could speak, Colby, what are the first things that you're looking at? Again, new in the role, or you're looking at a potential client where you're coming in as the CMO. What are you looking at when it comes to, we'll say, digital space more specifically? Is a redesign your go-to? What are your go-tos? What are the things you're looking at to really analyze your next step?
Yeah, I like to kind of look at this through like almost like a product life cycle perspective in one sense. And like, what's the brand life cycle at this point? What does that digital presence life cycle look like? Like, is it stale? Would be a question. Does it feel dusty? Does it feel out of era? Those are some obvious things, but when you're kind of talking to C-suite type folks, like that may not necessarily be the right angle to take on that. I think like you want to be talking about the business life cycle in itself. Are we preparing for a growth phase? Are we ramping up sales efforts? What are the things that need to be behind that revenue that will help drive revenue growth? And it's that funky, like, it depends answer, where that business is at in its growth phase. If it's like, okay, hey, we can kind of keep this thing where it's at for a while and let's just throw some fresh content on it. That'll do the job. But is it, hey man, we look 10 years old, we gotta really kind of shape things up here. I think those are some of the obvious things. Sometimes there's cultural stuff around a business that, maybe there's been a big change in leadership. Maybe there's been a big change in business direction, and you've got to really just kind of reposition yourself. The website is really the keeper of the brand in a lot of ways. Like almost all your key assets are going to be on the site, your identity, your brand promise. All those things should all be told on a website. And, if someone comes in new at the top, that's a good time to possibly rethink that. But, as a marketing director, there is a bit of that ego. There is a bit of that, like, I want to come in and make waves. And I think maybe when I was younger, I certainly felt like that with certain opportunities of like, hey, I want to come in and change stuff up and kind of put my stamp on things. But I think as the older I've gotten, and maybe the more people I've worked with, I think it's just really kind of analyzing where the money's at, and as a marketer, learning to speak a little more CFO language than CMO language, and kind of talk and be like, what's going to actually make an impact right now? Sometimes that is a new website, but sometimes it's let's invest in content, which we can then deploy on the website, the existing website, and new channels. Maybe we just need to make a few new landing pages. Maybe we need to, so that's just kind of a broad answer there. But I think in terms of that marketing director mentality, that does exist, because in tough times, or when you're changing jobs, the marketing director or your marketing dollars are the first things cut, or you need to, when you're going and interviewing for a new role somewhere, they're going to be like, tell me about your work in the past. And, a new website's a sexy item that you can point to and be like, this was a big thing. But what I think is actually, as I've gotten older, it's the numbers. If you can prove ROI in general revenue growth for the company, and I've been lucky to be part of some fast growing companies, with the bank, with the agency, with the brewery. Some of that has had to do, I would say the bank, a big part of that had to do with our website. And that's a project we worked on together. And that was really part of that time, was when, as a community bank, we really kind of broke a mold in terms of website storytelling. And I was really proud of that project. But, as I went to the brewery recently, we kicked that website down the road as much as we could, because we had to focus on sales. We had to focus on like point of sale, and what are those events? What are those quick decision-making opportunities for beer buyers? A website is not necessarily going to turn that right away. So, one other thought that pops up as I'm thinking about this is like, you also need to understand your customer a bit too. And I think like if it's an e-commerce type business, you might need that priority may need to be much higher in terms of dollars and frequency being invested into an online store, if that's your main space. But, I'd say the majority of my experience has been B2B type business, where it's a much longer sale, much higher price sale. And a website in that sense is more about vetting and understanding your partner in a complex industry. So that brochure just needs to be tight. You need to have great content on there. And, I think that has a longer shelf life in general. So yeah, it depends, Simon. I think every client's different in that sense. And it's really just kind of understanding the money of the business you're in and what's going to help you drive growth.
Yeah, as you were talking about that in there too, I was thinking totally the industry thing, like you just said, e-commerce, that is the tool. So maybe it is a full refresh. It's a look at the customer journey on that experience, because you have them for a short time. Where, like you're saying, a B2B bank, for example, it's vetting, it's instilling trust, it's bringing in all of that stuff as well into that. Ben, what were you going to say?
Yeah, and I guess the other thing that comes to my mind as you're talking about that, Colby, is the distinction between the back end of a website and the front end of a website, right? And how much could be leveraged and from what's been learned up to that point with the back end of a website, and then reflect that new energy, that new excitement on the front end. And obviously there are some ubiquitous platforms out there. The Shopify is on the e-commerce side, the WordPress is on the messaging side, pushing all sorts of different directions. I think a lot of people have this perspective of like it's one thing, as compared to no, depending on how it's built, perhaps we just reskin the front end, add some new features, and then a fairly light lift, small amount of time, small amount of budget can have the same impact as a full redesign, which has all of the weight of interviewing people, vetting them, determining are you not only the right people, but backed up by the right technology, and then going down that very long process of building out a website. And I just wonder if there's probably more work that we could do on the agency side to not only be front and center with our point of contact and their team, perhaps as below them, but also maybe up a rung to the extent that we can have a strong relationship there, and send a clear message that, hey, you know what, when and if you do have a transition, there's so much that we've learned, and we've got this investment in this back end. But yeah, if you want to mix up the front end, let's do that. It's just assuming that we're not blowing it from your perspective. Then let's get that fresh design energy, that fresh content energy in, and reflect that on the site at a lower cost. And I think that's one of those areas where sometimes you kind of like, oh my gosh, like everything was going so great until one person decided to exit stage left. And now this whole organization, which was talking about not having a lot of resources and wanting to do all these things, finds themselves in this really expensive, time and money endeavor to redo the website. And then sometimes you see those results and you're kind of scratching your head saying, wow, it doesn't feel like that checked very many boxes. So I guess from your perspective, do you generally, has the perspective been that a website is one thing and is not necessarily separated front end from back end?
Man, I just feel like that's all about resources in a lot of ways, and bandwidth. If I was in that marketing director seat, lots of times in my experience, I've been the one person, as you're kind of saying, like if I were to go, there's nobody, there's nobody, there's nobody there to understand that. I don't know, Ben. I think like if there's multiple people within a marketing department, then it's going to be much easier to double up. Uh, who knows what on the back end of that site?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if not, if there's only one person, then you're my best friend. You know what I mean? And I've got to just kind of have regular meetings and contact with you. So yeah, it can get a little tricky there, in terms of resourcing and who does what within a team. And a lot of my experience I've only had a couple where I've had people underneath me that I can kind of delegate that to. Most of the time, I'm spinning all the plates, right?
Totally makes sense. Yeah, you're the one who's just convening all that expertise and delivering on the one thing. Yeah, and one conversation I've had over and over again with my key points of contact, mainly with them, and sometimes they're a little taken aback because they're like, "Wait, what? What are we talking about?" Is to say, "Hey, we want to be a source of stability for you and your organization, and we want you to feel that when you decide to make a decision or someone else makes it for you, that you're no longer going to be here, that this is something you can feel really good and say, I'm leaving this place way better than I found it. You've got a really strong website. We've solved a bunch of stuff. And now you can do small things to have a huge impact versus having to knock it down and start over. And then potentially like, gosh, I can't believe a joker that was our previous, marketing director left us in such a terrible spot. Like nobody wants that. Right. And I think about like the positions I've been in with, on boards in the past, and the proverbial like Tupperware box, like, all right, you're the new chairman, here you go. And you're like, what do I do with this? As compared to like this really well operating and well functioning tool. That doesn't always play out the way we want to, but I think that's one of those areas where, a web team, a marketing team worth its salt can really, really support an organization in that time, instead of it being something where they're like, we don't know what to do with you, and we're going to start from scratch. So that's, I don't know.
Well,
Mixed results.
And kudos to companies like yours, and just in general, even the Squarespaces and the Wix companies of the world. They've made the back end much easier in the past for, if someone were to leave, someone could at least understand. I mean, I know your tool's always been intuitive, and that's been a great thing to see change since 2008 too. Really, it's just like some of the ease of picking up some of that stuff where, at least someone can get in and do some stuff. But like in general, keeping a close relationship with your dev team is critical.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So
that's
Colby,
two-way street, right? I mean, that's as
Yeah.
much on us as on the client, that we're reaching out and that they know where to go if they have a problem, and it's not just one person. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So Colby, you had mentioned you needing to put on like the CFO mindset, which I
Yeah.
find really interesting, especially in your role where it's kind of like you're the advocate for whatever you're presenting, to the client, and saying like you kind of have to sell it to them. And the best way to sell it to them is the ROI, is like, okay, if we do this because of the numbers I'm seeing now, we make this change, it costs X, but it's going to get you Y, right? What are some other reasons you would say? What are some of the key red flags, if you will, that you would present to a client in addition to ROI?
Yeah. I'll start with just another ROI discussion though from that CFO thing, because I think it's important, because it's helped me communicate a few times, which is amortizing that cost of a new website too over time. Where I think, like, if I were to ask you guys to give me the price for a website and you sent me, X amount of dollars, if you looked at it as a one-time cost, that might be a little bit of but if I
Yeah.
know that website is going to last me 3 to 5, maybe sometimes longer years, I think a good way a CFO can look at that is you amortize that cost over the lifetime of that site. It becomes a much more digestible number. And it makes sense if you were to look at a year's worth of business versus like, oh, I got to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a site in 1 year, so like, and that's going to depend on the company you're talking to, but I do think that a good CFO will understand that. And but in terms of red flags, I think some of the biggest things lately certainly is like, does it adjust to mobile? Is it a mobile first design? And sometimes it's crazy how you can go out there and still see designs that are laid out like it was 2008. And you still got to pinch and zoom to find the links. I mean, there's still a lot of that out there. And, there might be organizations that has a great sales team and, and their folks are out there crushing it and they're still doing well, and so they say, I don't really need this, but it's like, you want to kind of get them into the next era. So like one of the points of discussion there is like, hey, we've got, millennials are now the like biggest group in the workforce now. Like people like my son are now going to be entering the workforce. Like you got to be preparing for that next wave of folks, right? So I think just really the functionality and kind of being mobile first, I think is a big red flag. I think one of the things that is also a red flag is that I think was a trend in the past was just too much information. I think people used to just put everything they possibly could on a site, and you're serving the master Google for search, but you're really overwhelming your customers with choice in a lot of ways. So like really trying to focus in and slim down a site, I think is a philosophy I like to recommend and abide by as much as I possibly can. And I see that a lot in sort of the B2B banking or professional services space, where they want to just like get everything out there. And I think you're taking away talent from maybe taking away opportunity from some of your sales staff by losing the prospect of curiosity when exploring a site. Like, I think a good brand strategy, good storytelling strategy kind of takes you up to a certain point, and this is where a site can really kind of lead you up to a certain point where you're interested and like, okay, now I want to learn some more, but not too much information. Those are a couple that I think come off. And just really like, for me, I'm, having worked in a creative agency and worked with some really great artists and writers, how are you giving your content the best opportunity to shine? Visual and verbal content that just, pulls at the heartstrings or cuts right through to that is, it just makes me melt when I think about a project and what, drives success. So does the site present your story in the best way possible? And let's say you spent 20 grand on a couple videos, do you have the space to do that? So sometimes, I've recently been in business where we spent money on content, where I put it, I can push it through social a lot, or, and I just want people to see it. I want it to be out there. And those are sometimes hard conversations with the C-suite to get them to spend money on it, because you're like, where's it going to go? So, those are the types of thoughts, and all that takes strategy. All that takes some time to work through that. So I'd say those are some 3 red flags there.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I think back about our history at Cascade and how we, for the longest time, were so focused on the development side, and the design side wasn't a priority, which was where the state you found Lewis and Clark in when you came, is that we started down that path, and they're like, we're not quite feeling this. And that's when we brought in Watson and all of their magic. And in the way that it struck me at the time was like, it doesn't matter if your house has got the best framing possible. If they botch up the drywall and the exterior trim and the windows and the roof and all the stuff you can see, none of that stuff underlying is that valuable. On the flip, oftentimes you'll see that people will put all of their energy, or so much of their energy, on the front end, the design, the content, the assets, and it'll be propped up by a super lightweight platform that isn't intended to be pushed in those directions. So finding that balance can be really tricky. And again, it comes down to, where do you want to put the resources so that the chassis is strong enough to hold up all this stuff you're trying to put out to the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Colby, when you're talking about spending 20 grand on videos, Ben and I, we always go to the house reference and foundation and whatnot. The videos, I just picture being a beautiful front door, but they put it on the second floor. So you're approaching the house and you can't even get to it. Right.
Yeah.
That's just what I picture is a lot of people will do that, where their money was spent on X, but how they deployed it, how they used it, how it's implemented is not accessible, And I'm not talking about accessibility when it comes to, is it easy to read? Will a screen reader, adapt to this and all that? I'm talking about it just didn't deliver. It didn't hit home. And so I really appreciate, you almost start going into my realm of creative director and feeling the feelings part when you said it makes you melt, when that message and the imagery is all that sharp point and getting to where you wanted, versus all these other directions. I think that's appealing too. So as far as redesign, okay, let's talk about the other side of this, is just a facelift, right? What would you say, you go into, again, a client where it's well, the back end is actually pretty solid. It's pretty modern. We can work with it. Where do you focus then on a just a facelift? Is it images? And I really hope you're just going to say content is probably some of the key part. But what would you say on facelift?
Definitely content. I generally am attracted to short, punchy content and beautiful images with plenty of white space. And if there's a brand refresh that happens, and let's just swap out some of the key landing areas with the new stuff, I think that's what I would call a site refresh. Or let's just invest in a couple new templates on the site. A couple of the key landing pages or something. We don't have to blow the whole thing up. And I do think trimming down, as I mentioned before, is a great way to refresh too. Let's keep it simple.
Yeah,
and shorten some of the
Yeah, I like that. In your experience, when you look back on the last 2 decades or so, talking about brands that have redesigned, can you think, just off the top of your head, think of brands that redesigned full facelift or just a full from ground up?
Yeah. When I was in banking, I think the company that everyone always looked at was Umpqua. I think they've done a really, really nice job with their home pages. And they've done they've done their websites several times, but they're kind of the OG of breaking the mold in storytelling and banking, and they still do a good job of that. And certainly have led the way in terms of Pacific Northwest style, professional services kind of going. I kind of want to be like Umpqua, and so they're great. In terms of others, I feel like there's a lot of clients I've worked with that always point to Apple, and I hate saying it, but they're a behemoth, but they've really set this, just in terms of clean white space and highlighting some really quality images. There's them. I would like to just say every client that I've worked with, I always think 2.0 has been better than their first version. And, I really can't think of any that jump out unless brands you would know. But, I can think of a few clients at the agency days, like Oregon Blueberry Farms and Nursery was one of the ones where I just really loved how, you took sort of what was a unknown business in a digital space to a fantastic story with some strong images and a site that complemented all that content. That was a great project. I don't know. Again, I think a website is successful when the content shines and supports the business. And I don't have too many others just specifically I'd point to. I just kind of look for those key elements. Did we do a good job on making the content shine and the brand shine as styles and looks that I like?
So Colby, you're coming in as from a leadership perspective, what can they hand off to you that best equips you to help make those decisions if it's going to be a full redesign or just a facelift? What information could they hand you?
Got it. Yeah, I think that a marketing director or a marketing consultant, whether during the get to know you process, will figure that out. There will need to be a lot of conversations to make that a successful handoff. Certainly, I would want to know, what were some of the key major investments in the past. I would want to know, the history of the website, the history of the brand, what is, all the basics. But knowing what their pain points are, knowing what they determine will be a success for the marketing department going forward is the most important bit. If I were to be interviewing for a company as their marketing director, I would want to know what resources I'm working with and what are the pain points of the C-suite at that time. Yeah. And I think I'd be able to kind of figure out what I need to move forward in that. Because I don't want to come in and start proposing to blow stuff up if I know that's going to just it's going to end in failure.
So it's kind of more in the roles position to really equip that information or at least gather that information versus the company side of saying, here, this should equip you to make decisions. It's more your role coming in and knowing how to ask and find that information then.
Yeah, 100%. And I appreciate you distilling that for me. There's a lot of folks in leadership that don't know a lick about marketing. They don't. They might be operators. They might be CFO minded, which is what drove them to the top of their organization. And, investing in marketing or hiring a marketing director may have been a big leap for them at that time.
Yeah. Right.
So, they might just be, we just need to save money, or they might be, let's invest in sales more. And that's the same reason why when times get tough, the marketing dollars shrink a lot, because
Yeah.
it's hard, it's really hard. Here's the thing. As a marketing director, you've got to fight every day for your budget. It is a ongoing battle in just about every experience that I've had. Even with the most pro marketing people in charge, it's the first thing on the table, right? And I understand it. I get it. If I was in that seat, I might be making a similar decision.
Right.
But, I think there's that famous Rockefeller quote as well, which is like, hey, when there's blood in the streets, you should be buying. You know what I mean? Like, so there's some people retract and get more conservative, and some people are like, oh, it's time to go. It's time to double down. That's when you count your blessings as a marketing director. If you're kind of with the double down folks, let's go in and go. But yeah, it's always a battle. It's always a battle to prove your worth, and bigger investments in brand, bigger investments in content, and bigger investments in websites. Those are tough decisions. You've got, if you're on the inside, you are fighting for that project, and you've got to sell internally, to win that work, and that's a tough battle sometimes.
Well, I really appreciate your perspective on that, Colby. In looking at 2024, what are maybe some things that I think companies should be looking out for when it comes to redesign? What are some areas that companies you think are kind of targeting for this coming year?
I think from my experience, I think we're near the bottom of the trough economically. I think there's a lot of marketing departments that have been crunched. I think you've probably got a lot of marketing leaders that their roles have been expanded to include lower level activities. And, so I think there's a lot of companies just squeezing as much juice as they can out of their marketing teams. I think, to your question, companies should be finding out where they can start alleviating a bit more stress from those marketing teams, and what vendors they can bring in, or what headcount they can bring in to make their teams a bit more robust. And I've seen that all over the place. In my professional network myself, is like, to be thinking about what are the opportunities from an activation type standpoint, and what channels. And I don't think that's the conversation right now. I think the conversation is, let's get some help to some dollars to whatever your marketing department might need at this time. That's the opportunity, because I think most folks, at least small to medium sized businesses, and that I've experienced personally and through my personal network, they're feeling crunched. They're overwhelmed with not enough resources, and they're going to need help and tools to. You don't want to be the laggard when this thing starts to take off again, right? Because it's all a cycle. The market's going to bounce back. We're all kind of hoping for it all to take off, but if you just got one person there who doesn't have enough resources, and good luck. So I would say, like, this, right now we're in budgeting season too, in October here, before the new year.
Yeah.
Can you add a couple more percentage points to that marketing budget, wherever that is? Can you do that? That would be my message to clients out there,
But
or do you still just need to just keep it tight?
I know that little soundbite right there of you saying that will just be music to the ears of a lot of our listeners. And I know specifically probably a lot of our clients are like, oh, Lord, please, yes, I could just use a little notch up here so I can take a day off. Or like you're saying, skill set. I'm not supposed to be doing this content. I'm supposed to have someone else helping me.
Yes.
I'm just big picture, and
Yes.
and being able to step in and support, which in a lot of ways is kind of, I think, our role with a lot of our clients is supporting that. However, we know that internally, like, they're seeking budget approval too. Like, we're sitting here, and I know I had like 2 emails that go out this morning where it was kind of just, I'm giving ammo to these poor people and they're pitching it up the line, like trying to, like, I'm giving all the ammo to them, like, this is really what you need. This is what it'll take. And then they're going to bat for it, because they want it, they need it, they know the value in it, so that is definitely music to the ears of a lot. I'm hoping a lot of our customers or clients and listeners.
Yeah.
So
it's been an overwhelming last 3-4 years, it's been just in terms of trying to, make the sausage and, get it to market. If for one person marketing teams or small marketing teams that, need help, that I think that's the need, and you just kind of trust them to produce, that would be my recommendation. Yeah.
So in a dream world, Colby, we're looking at, again, 2024. What kind of projects, what kind of clients, what kind of work are you hoping to do more of? What is kind of that dream scenario for you?
I love doing like prospective brand positioning and strategy work. One thing I like to say about the sort of strategy and consulting type work that I do is I usually encounter my clients in their most ambitious state. Like, when I meet with them, they're ready to tackle something. They may not know what it is or specifically what's the best solution, but they're ready to they're ready to go. They're in an ambitious state. And so the value that I like to bring, and that really makes me feel good, is helping them coalesce all those thoughts, research behind it, and sharing with them the findings and making recommendations on what goes forward, right? And then I can hand off beautiful plans and put together a team for them or help them manage it. Those are the types of relationships I want, to where I can guide a person through some strategy, whether it's a brand refresh or a marketing, what are we going to do this next year? And then I can bring in my most talented friends to execute that stuff.
That's a pretty cool feeling when you work with folks, and at the end of it, you, like you said, you deliver something to them. Do you get a sense of their, like, achievable? Don't they feel like, we achieved this? Because in a lot of ways, like you're saying, you're getting to know them, you're trying to create this persona, this brand, and a lot of that is coming from the heart of those folks in leadership, right? Like, of who they are. And so they pour themselves into it. And at the end, when you can take all the noise and distill it down to this thing, however it's delivered, you just get that sense of achievement from them, right?
I mean, when the strategy and the creative all comes together, that is the best feeling for me. And when the client understands that as well, that is the best feeling in the world. I am not going to lie or gloss over the fact that can be a very painful process at times. To go through, it takes a change in people, or you have to change their understanding, or, like we've alluded to a bit in this conversation, the ROI isn't immediate. So you might go through that stuff and set the plan and be like, that feels good but the ROI might take a little bit to get it back. Through. And so I think there's always that phase where, like, are we doing, there's a little bit of buyer's remorse, or, you've got to get them to trust the process, So, it's never like, yes, we did it right off the bat. I think there's a lot of ambition. The process is, there's a lot of ambition. There's bringing the team together around the plan. There's launching, and then there's like, come on, stay with it. Like, that's what it's about. And, That's what's fun. That's
Colby,
business.
do you have any thoughts or ideas for the listeners about tips for managing those expectations?
Oh, just as much of that conversation of what we just talked about up front, and understanding, having a good sense of that ROI. If you're investing in a brand or a website, as I said, your ROI might be a couple years out. The big win might be, are you working with a small business that's trying to build and sell? Right? Then ROI in the short term doesn't mean as much as building a brand that you can sell, building a book of business that you can sell. That's the big win. Or are we doing a marketing campaign where I need to see click-through numbers? I need to see web traffic. I need to see, engagement. I need to track the hot zones on the website, make sure, that's a whole different conversation than we're building this thing to sell. It's just kind of trying to really understand your customer and trying to get as much of that conversation out the way up front.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Having those metrics that you can kind of point back to and kind of the down in distance, if you will, in the immediate term, but then also keeping an eye on the long-term goals there and not getting off track when, things don't necessarily go your way. Those can be tricky conversations. Again, goes back to that courage. And I think to your point, over communicating. And sometimes I find you got to ask some kind of probing questions around, what does success look like to you? Right. That's one thing I find myself asking a lot is, what do you care about? What does success look like? Okay, let's track to that in a variety of ways so that, we don't feel that buyer's remorse. We don't get impatient and not give it a chance to be successful. Because we've had some experiences over the last 25 years I've been doing this, where you look back and they ran out of patience. They stopped funding the effort. And then all of a sudden, then all of a sudden thing pops in 3 or 4 months and the relationship is soured and you're like, man, let that one get away. And yeah, that can be tricky.
Yeah. An example recently was with my friends over at Migration. We're investing a lot of time and money in building some new beer brands, designing a new label, renaming a new beer, figuring out what's going to take the place of another beer and kind of putting together this big plan. And we understand it takes time for a new product to grow. And so that's a full-on team understanding that, hey, we're tracking this thing grow over time, right? We're watching the life cycle of another brand that might be kind of running its course, and we all understand that. But hey, if I'm running a weekend event, we got to look at how many people are going to come in, what are we paying on that? What's a quick turn ROI on that? And then we'll know that's success. Those are two completely different marketing related projects.
That's a great example.
Yeah. You got to be able to do both. And I think it's just really communication of expectations all the time, meeting a lot, having those, what's it look like to you? What's a win look like to you? So.
Nice.
Cool.
Well, Colby, I appreciate your time and sharing some of your stories. This is kind of this topic as well as your input. I think it'd be fun to have you back, in episode number 50 or something. We get a few more in there and bridge this topic again and go from there. But Ben and I really appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure. This was a lot of fun. I'd be happy to come back. It's good to be around you.
Awesome. All right, Colby, I appreciate it. Thank you, listeners. As always, please don't forget to follow all those normal social cues. But also, if you have any questions or topic ideas, please email them to us at webwell@cascadewebdev.com. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Colby. Adios.
Adios.